The crash. The vast emptiness of space shattered as the sleek scout ship tore through the atmosphere of Nexus 9, a barren world on the fringes of explored space. Alarms blared within the cockpit as Zara, the ship's lone occupant, fought desperately with the controls. Her four-fingered hands danced across the flickering console, but it was a losing battle against the planet's unforgiving gravity. "Come on, hold together," Zara muttered through gritted teeth, her silvery skin glistening with sweat. The ship bucked and shuddered, pieces of the hull tearing away in fiery streaks. As the ground rushed up to meet her, Zara closed her large violet eyes and braced for impact. The crash was deafening. Metal screamed as it tore apart, and the once graceful scout ship carved a deep furrow into the planet's rust-colored soil. When the dust settled, all that remained was a twisted wreck, steam hissing from ruptured coolant lines. Inside the mangled cockpit, Zara hung limply in her harness, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. She was alive, but barely. As consciousness faded, Zara's last thoughts were of her mission. She had to warn them. She had to. Miles away, the crash had not gone unnoticed. Jack Harper, a human prospector who had called Nexus 9 home for the past 3 years, lowered his binoculars and frowned. He'd seen ships come and go before, smugglers, mostly, or the occasional corporate survey team. But this was different. This ship had come down hard, and from the looks of it, whoever was inside wasn't walking away. Jack sighed, running a hand through his unkempt beard. Every instinct told him to stay put, to mind his own business. Nexus 9 wasn't a place for heroes. It was a place where you kept your head down and hoped the universe forgot about you. But something tugged at him. Curiosity, maybe, or perhaps a long-buried sense of duty he thought he'd left behind on Earth. "Damn it," Jack muttered, grabbing his pack and rifle. "This is how you get yourself killed, Harper." The trek to the crash site took hours. Nexus 9's twin suns beat down mercilessly, and the rocky terrain was unforgiving. By the time Jack crested the final ridge and saw the wreckage up close, his canteen was nearly empty and his legs ached. The ship was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Its design was sleek and organic, more like a sea creature than a spacecraft. Or at least it had been before impact. Now it was a mangled mess of twisted metal and shattered crystal. Jack approached cautiously, rifle at the ready. He'd heard stories of automated defenses that could outlive their ships, waiting to fry any would-be scavengers. But as he drew closer, he heard something that made him pause. A moan, weak but unmistakably alive. "Hello," Jack called out, immediately cursing himself for breaking the silence. "Anyone in there?" Another moan, slightly louder this time. Jack quickened his pace, clambering over a piece of debris to peer into the shattered cockpit. What he saw made him stumble back in shock. The pilot was alive, but she was definitely not human. Her skin was a pale, silvery blue, and her face was more angular than any human's. Four-fingered hands clutched weakly at the restraints holding her in place. An alien. A real, honest-to-God alien. Jack's mind raced. In all his years of space travel, he'd never encountered a non-human sentient species. There were rumors, of course. Grainy footage and conspiracy theories. But nothing concrete. Nothing like this. The alien's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises of deep violet. They focused on Jack, and he saw fear and confusion in their depths. Jack said softly, holstering his rifle and holding up his empty hands. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The alien tried to speak, but only managed a wet cough. Dark blue blood flecked her lips. Jack's survival instincts warred with his conscience. He should leave. This wasn't his problem. But as he looked at the injured alien, he knew he couldn't just walk away. "All right," he muttered. "Let's get you out of there." It took nearly an hour to extricate the alien from the wreckage. Her legs were pinned, and Jack had to use a piece of the ship's hull as a makeshift lever to free her. By the time he gently laid her on the ground outside the ship, the alien was barely conscious. Jack did his best to assess her injuries. Multiple lacerations, probably some internal bleeding. Her left arm hung at an odd angle, broken or dislocated, and her breathing was labored, each inhale accompanied by a worrying whistle. "You're in rough shape," Jack said, more to himself than to the alien. "But I've seen worse. Had worse, even." He rummaged through his pack, pulling out a medkit. It wasn't much. Some bandages, antiseptic, painkillers designed for human physiology. But it was better than nothing. As Jack worked to stabilize the alien's condition, her eyes opened again. This time, they seemed clearer, more focused. "Who?" she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" Jack blinked in surprise. "You speak English." The alien shook her head weakly, wincing at the movement. She tapped a small device affixed to her throat. "Universal Translator," she managed. "Handy," Jack said, trying to keep his tone light as he wrapped a bandage around a particularly nasty gash on her arm. "I'm Jack Harper. And you are?" "Zara," the alien replied. "Scout, Falaran Confederacy." Jack nodded, as if encountering crashed alien scouts was an everyday occurrence for him. "Well, Zara of the Falaran Confederacy, you've had one hell of a landing. But don't worry, we'll get you patched up." Zara's eyes widened suddenly, and she gripped Jack's arm with surprising strength. "No, you don't understand. Danger coming. Have to warn." Her words were cut off as she lapsed back into unconsciousness, her grip on Jack's arm going slack. Jack sat back on his heels, looking from the unconscious alien to the wreckage of her ship, then to the vast, empty horizon of Nexus 9. Danger was coming. What kind of danger? And warn who? He shook his head, one problem at a time. Right now, he needed to get Zara somewhere safe, somewhere he could properly treat her injuries. His shelter was miles away, and the suns were already dipping towards the horizon. Nexus 9's nights were brutally cold, and he doubted the alien's physiology was any better suited to it than his own. With a grunt of effort, Jack carefully lifted Zara into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, but still a substantial burden for the long trek ahead. "All right, Zara," he said to his unconscious charge. "Let's get you home. And then maybe you can tell me just what kind of mess I've gotten myself into." As Jack set off across the barren landscape, the twin suns of Nexus 9 cast long shadows behind him. In the distance, something glinted in the sky, a pinprick of light that might have been a star, or might have been something else entirely. Jack trudged on, unaware of the eyes watching from above, or of the storm that was about to break upon this forgotten world. All he knew was the weight in his arms and the long road ahead. The universe, it seemed, had other plans for Jack Harper's quiet exile. And as the sun set on Nexus 9, the first chapter of an extraordinary tale was just beginning to unfold. Unlikely alliance. The journey back to Jack's shelter was grueling. Nexus 9's unforgiving terrain seemed determined to slow his progress, and Zara's unconscious form grew heavier with each step. As the planet's twin suns dipped below the horizon, the temperature plummeted, and Jack's breath came out in visible puffs. "Almost there," he muttered, more to keep himself going than for Zara's benefit. The alien remained stubbornly unconscious, her silvery skin taking on a worrying pallor. Finally, as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Jack's shelter came into view. It was a hodgepodge structure, cobbled together from scavenged ship parts and local materials. But it was sturdy, and more importantly, it was home. Jack shouldered open the door and gently laid Zara on his bunk. In the harsh light of the shelter's interior, her injuries looked even worse. Dark blue bruises mottled her skin, and her breathing was shallow and labored. "Okay," Jack said, running a hand through his hair. "Alien physiology. How hard can it be?" He set to work, cleaning and bandaging Zara's wounds as best he could. Her arm was definitely dislocated, And after a moment's hesitation, Jack gritted his teeth and popped it back into place. Zara let out a pained groan but didn't wake. As he worked, Jack's mind raced. What had Zara meant about danger coming? And who was she trying to warn? He glanced at the communicator on his wrist, a relic from his days in the Earth Defense Force. It had been silent for years, but now he wondered if he should try to send a message. But to whom? And what would he even say? A soft moan from the bunk interrupted his thoughts. Zara's eyes fluttered open, those strange violet irises focusing on Jack with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Easy," Jack said, holding up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "You're safe. Do you remember me? I'm Jack. I found you in the crash." Zara's hand went to her throat, fingers brushing the translator device. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse but clear. "I remember. You helped me." Jack nodded. "That's right. How are you feeling?" "Like I crash-landed on a desolate rock," Zara replied, a hint of dry humor in her voice. She tried to sit up but winced, falling back onto the bunk. "Whoa, take it easy," Jack said. "You're pretty banged up. Mind telling me what happened up there?" Zara's expression darkened. "I was on a scouting mission, routine survey of this sector, but I picked up something strange, a signal I couldn't identify. When I tried to get a closer look, my ship's systems went haywire. Next thing I knew, I was plummeting towards this planet." Jack frowned. "A signal? From where?" "I'm not sure," Zara admitted. "It seemed to be coming from somewhere in this system, but I couldn't pinpoint it before." She gestured weakly at herself. "And the danger you mentioned," Jack pressed. "What's coming?" Zara's eyes widened. "You don't understand. My people, the Falaran, we're at war. Have been for decades. If that signal is what I think it is." She trailed off, her face paling. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with Nexus 9's frigid night. What do you think it is?" "A weapon," Zara whispered. "Something that could tip the balance of the war. If the Krayks get their hands on it." "The Krayks?" Jack interrupted. "I'm guessing they're the bad guys in this scenario." Zara's lips twisted in a humorless smile. "They'd say the same about us. But yes, from my perspective, they're the enemy. And they're ruthless. If they traced my ship's trajectory." She didn't need to finish the thought. Jack understood all too well. "They'll be coming to find you. And whatever this weapon is." Zara nodded grimly. "I need to contact my people. Warn them. But my ship's communications array was destroyed in the crash." Jack glanced at his old communicator again. It wasn't designed for interstellar communication, but maybe. "I might be able to help with that. But first, you need to rest. Heal up. We can figure out our next move in the morning." Zara looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was clearly taking its toll. Her eyelids drooped, and she nodded weakly. "Thank you, Jack," she murmured as sleep claimed her once more. Jack watched her for a moment, then moved to the shelter's small window. The night sky of Nexus 9 stretched above, vast and indifferent. Somewhere out there, two alien races were locked in a war he knew nothing about. And now, through some cosmic joke, he was caught in the middle of it. "What have you gotten yourself into, Harper?" he muttered. The night passed fitfully. Jack dozed in a chair, waking every hour to check on Zara. By the time Nexus 9's twin suns peeked over the horizon, he was bleary-eyed but alert. Zara stirred, sitting up with only a slight wince. "Your medical skills are impressive," she said, flexing her previously dislocated arm. "I feel not good, but better." "Good enough to fill me in on what we're dealing with?" Jack asked, sliding a bowl of reconstituted protein paste across to her. "Sorry about breakfast. Gourmet cuisine isn't Nexus 9's strong suit." Zara sniffed the paste cautiously before taking the small bite. Her face scrunched in disgust, but she ate it anyway. "I suppose I owe you that much," she said between bites. "What do you know about the wider galaxy, Jack?" Jack shrugged. Not much. Earth's got colonies scattered across a few systems, but we haven't encountered any other sentient life. Well, until now, he added with a wry smile. Your people are young, then, Zara mused. The Falaran Confederacy has existed for millennia. We've explored much of this arm of the galaxy, established trade routes, made allies, and enemies. Like these Krayks you mentioned, Jack prompted. Zara nodded, her expression grim. The Krayks Empire, they believe it's their destiny to rule the galaxy. For centuries, they've been expanding, conquering world after world. The Confederacy has managed to hold them at bay, but she trailed off, staring into the distance. But now they might have a super weapon, Jack finished. Potentially, Zara corrected. The signal I detected, it bore similarities to ancient Falaran technology. Technology we thought lost ages ago. If the Krayks have found it, or worse, learned to replicate it. Jack leaned back, processing the information. It was a lot to take in. Yesterday, he'd been a simple prospector on a forgotten world. Now he was discussing interstellar wars and ancient superweapons. So what's our next move? He asked. Zara looked at him sharply. You've already done more than I had any right to expect, Jack. This isn't your fight. Jack snorted. Maybe not. But if these Krayks are as bad as you say, I've got a feeling it'll be everyone's fight sooner or later. Besides, he added with a grin, things were getting a little boring around here anyway. For the first time since he'd met her, Zara smiled. It transformed her alien features, making her look younger, almost vulnerable. I thank you, Jack. Truly. The moment was interrupted by a sharp beeping from Jack's wrist communicator. He frowned, tapping at the device. That's weird. It's picking up a signal. But that's impossible. This thing isn't built for. His words died in his throat as he looked up. Zara had gone rigid, her violet eyes wide with fear. We need to move, she said, her voice tight. Now. What? Why? Jack asked, but even as the words left his mouth he heard it. A low, thrumming sound, growing louder by the second. Crake's dropship, Zara hissed, struggling to her feet. They're here. Jack cursed, grabbing his pack and shoving supplies into it haphazardly. How? How did they find us so quickly? Zara's hand went to her throat, to the translator device. Understanding dawned on her face. The translator. It must have a tracking beacon. I should have realized. Beat yourself up later, Jack said, tossing her a jacket. Right now, we need to disappear. They burst out of the shelter just as a sleek, predatory-looking ship crested the ridge. It was larger than Zara's scout ship had been, bristling with weapons. As Jack watched, a hatch opened in its side, and figures began to descend on zip lines. This way, Jack said, grabbing Zara's hand and pulling her towards a narrow ravine. There's a network of caves not far from here. We can lose them in there. They ran, Jack supporting Zara as best he could. Behind them, harsh voices called out in an alien language. A sound like thunder cracked the air, and the ground near Jack's feet exploded in a shower of dirt and rock. Energy weapons, Zara gasped as they stumbled into the ravine. Precise, but slow to recharge. We have a chance if we keep moving. Jack nodded grimly, leading them deeper into the maze-like network of canyons. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the Krayks organized a proper search. Finally, after what felt like hours of running and climbing, they reached the cave system. Jack ushered Zara inside, then paused at the entrance, listening intently. In the distance, he could hear the faint whine of the Krayks dropship. Okay, he said, turning to Zara. I think we've bought ourselves some time. Now what? Zara leaned against the cave wall, catching her breath. We need to find a way to contact my people. And she hesitated, then met Jack's eyes. We need to find that signal source. Whatever it is, we can't let the Krayks get their hands on it. Jack nodded slowly. All right. But first things first. Let's see about getting that tracker off you. As he examined the translator device on Zora's throat, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of his situation. Here he was, a washed-up ex-soldier turned hermit, planning to take on an alien empire with an injured scout from another alien civilization. But as he looked at Zora, saw the determination in her eyes, and the trust she was placing in him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Well, he said with a wry smile, I always wanted to see more of the galaxy. Guess I should be careful what I wish for. Ha! Zara returned the smile, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever came next, they were in it together. An unlikely alliance, forged in the crucible of danger and desperation. Outside the cave, Nexus 9's unforgiving landscape stretched to the horizon. Somewhere out there, the Krayeks were searching. And somewhere, a mysterious signal pulsed, holding the key to a conflict that spanned the stars. The hunt was on, and the fate of more than just two people hung in the balance. The chase. The cave was dark and damp. The only sound the steady drip of water from unseen stalactites. Jack worked in silence, his brow furrowed in concentration as he examined the translator device on Zora's throat. I think I've got it, he muttered, carefully prying open a small panel on the device. There's definitely a transmitter in here, separate from the translation circuits. If I can just... There was a small spark, and Zora flinched. Sorry, Jack said quickly. You okay? Zara nodded. It's fine. Just strange. I've worn this device for so long, it feels like a part of me. Jack grunted in acknowledgement, focusing on the delicate circuitry. After a few more tense moments, there was a soft click, and a tiny component came free in his hand. There, he said, holding up the transmitter. It was smaller than his thumbnail, a marvel of alien engineering. That should keep the Krayeks from tracking us directly, though I'm guessing they've got other ways of searching. Indeed, Zara confirmed, rubbing her throat where the translator sat. They'll have bioscanners, heat detectors, and they're relentless. They won't give up easily. Jack pocketed the transmitter and began gathering their meager supplies. Then we'd better get moving. Any idea where this signal of yours was coming from? Zara closed her eyes, concentrating. Before my systems failed, I managed to get a general direction. Northeast of here, I think. But it was faint, possibly underground. Underground, huh? Jack mused. That could work in our favor. These caves stretch for miles. If we're lucky, they might lead us right to it. As if on cue, a distant echo reached their ears. Voices, harsh and alien, reverberating through the cave system. Looks like luck isn't on our side today, Jack muttered. Come on, we need to move. They set off deeper into the caves, Jack leading the way with a small portable lamp. The tunnels twisted and branched, forming a labyrinth that would have been easy to get lost in under normal circumstances. But with the sounds of pursuit spurring them on, Jack and Zara pushed forward, choosing paths almost at random. After what felt like hours of tense, silent travel, they emerged into a vast underground cavern. Jack's lamp barely penetrated the darkness, but they could hear the rush of water somewhere in the blackness. An underground river, Zara whispered. It might lead us out of the cave system. Jack nodded, and hopefully throw off our pursuers. Can you swim? Zara hesitated. I'm not sure. My people aren't aquatic. But I suppose now is as good a time as any to find out. They made their way carefully to the water's edge. The current was swift but not overwhelming. Jack tested it with his hand, finding it bitingly cold. Okay, he said, securing their pack as best he could. We'll go together. If you start to struggle, just hold on to me. Ready? Zara took a deep breath, then nodded. Ready. They slipped into the water, the cold shocking the air from their lungs. For a moment, they floundered, the current threatening to sweep them away. But then Jack found his rhythm, and Zara proved to be a quick study. Together, they began to make progress downstream. The river carried them through twisting passages, sometimes so narrow they had to turn sideways to avoid scraping against the rock walls. Other times, it opened into vast chambers where their splashing echoes seemed deafening in the darkness. Just as Jack's muscles were beginning to burn from the effort, he saw a glimmer ahead. Light. He gasped. I think we're nearing an exit. They redoubled their efforts, swimming towards the growing patch of daylight. With a final surge, they burst out of the cave mouth into open air, the river depositing them unceremoniously onto a rocky bank. For a moment, they just lay there, panting and shivering. Then Jack started to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound born of relief and adrenaline. After a moment, Zara joined in, her alien laughter mixing with his in the crisp air. We made it, Jack said, sitting up and surveying their surroundings. They were in a narrow valley, steep cliffs rising on either side. The river continued its journey, snaking the way into the distance. Zara nodded, wringing water from her silvery hair. For now, but we can't assume we've lost them entirely. Agreed, Jack said, getting to his feet and helping Zara up. Any idea where we are in relation to that signal? Zara closed her eyes, seeming to concentrate. After a moment, she pointed upriver. That way, I think. It's stronger now. They set off, following the river's course. The terrain was rough, but the river had carved a path through the rocky landscape, making their journey easier than it might have been. As they walked, Jack found himself studying Zara. Despite her alien features, he was beginning to read her expressions, to understand the subtle shifts in her body language. She was tense, alert, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. So, he said, partly to break the silence and partly out of genuine curiosity, tell me more about your people. The Falaran, right? What are they like? Zara glanced at him, seeming surprised by the question. We're explorers at heart, seekers of knowledge. Before the war with the Orcs, we spent centuries cataloging the wonders of the galaxy, building great archives of information. Sounds peaceful, Jack commented. Zara's expression darkened. It was. Until the Orcs came. They see knowledge as power, and they wanted it all for themselves. When we refused to submit, to hand over our archives, that's when the war began. Jack nodded slowly. It was a familiar story, even if the players were alien. And now, what happens if you win this war? When we win, Zara corrected firmly. We'll rebuild, return to exploration. There's so much of the galaxy we haven't seen yet, so many mysteries to uncover. She looked at Jack curiously. What about your people? You said you have colonies, but you've never encountered other sentient life. Jack shrugged. Not until now. We've been so focused on our own expansion, our own squabbles. I guess we never looked hard enough. Their conversation was cut short by a distant rumble. They froze, exchanging a look of alarm. Please tell me that was thunder, Jack said, though he already knew the answer. Zara shook her head grimly. Orcs dropship. They're scanning the area. We need to find cover, quickly. They scrambled up the valley wall, seeking shelter among the rocks. Just as they tucked themselves into a narrow crevice, a massive ship appeared overhead. It was larger than the one they'd seen earlier, its hull bristling with sensors and weapons. Dreadnought class, Zara whispered. They're taking this seriously. Jack watched as smaller ships deployed from the dreadnought, fanning out across the landscape. I'm flattered, he muttered. Any idea how close we are to that signal source? Zara closed her eyes, concentrating. Close, she said after a moment. Very close, but I can't pinpoint it exactly without my equipment. Well, we can't stay here, Jack said, eyeing the search patterns of the Orc ships. Sooner or later, they'll find us. We need to keep moving. They waited for a gap in the search pattern, then slipped out of their hiding spot. Moving as quickly as they dared, They made their way along the ridge, using the terrain for cover whenever possible. As they crested a hill, Jack suddenly grabbed Zara's arm, pulling her down. "Look," he hissed, pointing to a depression in the valley below. There, half buried in the rocky soil, was a structure. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen, a twisted spire of metal and crystal, pulsing with a faint, otherworldly light. Zara's eyes widened. "That's it," she breathed. "The source of the signal. It's Falaran technology, but ancient. I've never seen anything like it outside of historical records." "Well, let's hope it was worth all this trouble," Jack said, "because we're not the only ones who found it." On the far side of the depression, a Krayx landing craft was touching down. Armored figures were already emerging, their weapons trained on the mysterious structure. "We have to get there first," Zara said urgently. "If the Krayx activate that device, or worse, destroy it." Jack nodded grimly. "I hear you, but we're outgunned and outnumbered. We need a plan." Zara's eyes darted between the Krayx forces and the ancient Falaran device. Then, suddenly, she smiled. It was a fierce expression, full of determination and a hint of mischief. "I have an idea," she said, "but you're not going to like it." Jack couldn't help but grin back. "Those are usually the best kind. What did you have in mind?" As Zara outlined her plan, Jack felt a mix of admiration and trepidation. It was audacious, dangerous, and probably insane. In other words, it was exactly the kind of plan he would have come up with in his military days. "All right," he said when she finished. "Let's do it. But if we die, I'm blaming you." Zara's laugh was low and determined. "Fair enough. Now, let's go save the galaxy." As they prepared to put their desperate plan into action, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the strange turns his life had taken. A week ago, he'd been a solitary prospector on a forgotten world. Now he was about to face off against an alien invasion force alongside a member of an advanced alien civilization. But as he looked at Zara, saw the trust and determination in her eyes, he knew he wouldn't have it any other way. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. The fate of two civilizations, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance, and the final confrontation was about to begin. Revelations and sacrifices. Jack's heart pounded as he crouched behind a rocky outcropping, watching the Krayx forces advance on the ancient Falaran device. Beside him, Zara was tense, her violet eyes narrowed in concentration. "Remember the plan," she whispered. "We only get one shot at this." Jack nodded grimly. "Yeah, no pressure or anything. Just infiltrating an alien war party to activate a mysterious ancient device that might save the galaxy. Typical Tuesday, right?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Zara's lips twitched in a small smile. "Your species has an odd way of coping with stress." "You have no idea," Jack muttered. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "All right, showtime." With a final nod to Zara, Jack slipped out from behind the rocks and began making his way down the slope towards the Krayx landing site. He moved as stealthily as he could, using the terrain for cover. As he drew closer, he got his first good look at the Krayx. They were imposing figures, taller than humans and built like tanks. Their armor was a deep, iridescent black that seemed to absorb light. But it was their faces that sent a chill down Jack's spine. What he could see of them beneath their helmets was reptilian, with eyes that glowed an eerie yellow. Jack pushed down his fear and focused on the task at hand. He needed to create a distraction, something big enough to draw the Krayx away from the device and give Zara a chance to reach it. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out a small but potent explosive, a relic from his military days that he'd held onto just in case. Well, this certainly qualified as a case. With practiced ease, he set the charge and took cover. The explosion, when it came, was spectacular. A fireball erupted on the far side of the Krayx position, sending debris and smoke billowing into the air. The effect was immediate, Most of the Krayx forces turned towards the explosion, weapons raised. Jack heard guttural shouts in an alien language as they began to fan out, searching for the source of the attack. Now came the truly dangerous part of the plan. Taking a deep breath, Jack stood up and walked directly towards the nearest Krayx soldier, his hands raised. "Hey there," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "Don't suppose you folks are looking for a guide? I know this planet like the back of my hand." The Krayx soldier whirled, weapon trained on Jack. For a heart-stopping moment, Jack thought he was about to be vaporized. But then the alien barked something into its comm unit, and suddenly Jack found himself surrounded. As the Krayx began to interrogate him in their harsh, clicking language, Jack caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. Zara, taking advantage of the distraction, was making her way towards the ancient device. Jack did his best to keep the Krayx focused on him, gesturing wildly and babbling about mineral deposits and hidden caves. He had no idea if they understood a word he was saying, but at least they seemed more confused than murderous. Just when he thought the ruse couldn't last much longer, there was a blinding flash of light from the direction of the Falaran device. Everyone, Krayx and Jack alike, turned to look. Zara stood before the now active device, her hands on its crystalline surface. Energy coursed over her body, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Krayx forces," she intoned, her words somehow understood by all present. "You have trespassed in territory beyond your understanding. Leave now or face the consequences." For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, with a roar, the Krayx commander ordered his troops to attack. What happened next was chaos. Beams of energy lanced out from the Krayx weapons, only to be absorbed by a shimmering field around Zara and the device. In return, bolts of blue-white energy shot from the device, scattering the Krayx forces. Jack took advantage of the confusion to break away from his captors, sprinting towards Zara. As he reached her, he felt the strange energy field envelop him, tingling across his skin. "Zara," he shouted over the din of battle. "What is this thing? What's happening to you?" Zara turned to look at him, and Jack gasped. Her eyes were solid violet now, pulsing with the same energy that flowed through the device. "It's a nexus," she said, her voice oddly distant. "A junction point in the fabric of space-time. Our ancestors built it as a defense against extinction-level threats. But its power, it's overwhelming. I can see everything." Jack grabbed her shoulders, suddenly afraid. "Zara, you need to let go. This thing is doing something to you." She shook her head slowly. "No, Jack. This is what I was meant to find, what I was meant to become. With this power, I can end the war. I can save my people." As if to demonstrate, she raised a hand. A pulse of energy shot out, and suddenly, the Krayx dreadnought overhead began to break apart, its pieces drifting harmlessly into the atmosphere. Jack watched in awe and terror. The power Zara now wielded was godlike, capable of reshaping reality itself. But as he looked into her glowing eyes, he saw something that chilled him to his core, a growing detachment, as if the Zara he knew was being subsumed by the cosmic forces she now commanded. "Zara, listen to me," he pleaded. "This isn't you. You're not a weapon. You're a person. Remember, you told me your people were explorers, seekers of knowledge, not destroyers." For a moment, Zara's expression flickered, a hint of uncertainty crossing her face, but then her features hardened again. "This is the only way, Jack. With this power, I can ensure peace. I can protect everyone." "At what cost?" Jack argued. "Your humanity. Your soul." "Zara, please. This isn't the answer. It's just trading one form of destruction for another." As they argued, the battle raged around them. The remaining Krayx forces, realizing the tide had turned, were retreating to their ships. But Zara seemed beyond caring, her attention focused on the vast cosmic vistas now open to her perception. "I can see it all, Jack," she murmured. "The past, the future, the infinite possibilities. With this power, I could reshape the galaxy, make it better, safer. Jack felt a deep sadness well up inside him. He recognized the look in Zara's eyes. He'd seen it before, in soldiers who'd seen too much, who'd convinced themselves that the end justified any means. He knew then that words alone wouldn't be enough to reach her. Taking a deep breath, he did the only thing he could think of. He stepped forward and hugged her tightly. Zara stiffened, the energy crackling around her intensifying. For a moment, Jack thought he'd made a terrible mistake. But then, slowly, he felt her begin to relax. "Jack," she whispered, her voice sounding more like herself. What's happening to me?" "You're losing yourself," he said softly. "But I'm not going to let that happen. Remember who you are, Zara. Remember why we came here." As he held her, Jack felt the energy field around them begin to fluctuate. The ancient device pulsed erratically, as if responding to Zara's internal conflict. Suddenly, a klaxon blared from the device. Zara's eyes widened in alarm. "No," she gasped. "The Nexus. It's destabilizing. The power is too much for it to contain." Jack looked around frantically. The ground was beginning to shake, fissures opening up around the device. What does that mean? What's going to happen? Zara pushed away from him, her face a mask of determination and regret. "It means I have to make a choice," she said. "Jack, you need to get out of here. Now." "What?" "No," Jack protested. "I'm not leaving you." Zara smiled sadly. "You have to. Someone needs to warn both our peoples about what happened here, about the danger of this technology." She placed a hand on his cheek. "Thank you, Jack, for reminding me who I am, who we're meant to be." Before Jack could react, Zara thrust out her hand. A pulse of energy enveloped him, and he felt himself being lifted off the ground. "Zara?" "No," he shouted, but it was too late. With a gesture, she sent him flying, away from the destabilizing nexus and toward safety. The last thing Jack saw before he lost consciousness was Zara turning back to the ancient device, her hands outstretched as she tried to contain the growing maelstrom of energy. Then everything went white. When Jack came to, he was lying on a rocky outcropping far from the site of the nexus. His head throbbed, and every muscle in his body ached. But he was alive. Stumbling to his feet, he looked back towards where the device had been. There was nothing there now but a massive crater, still smoking faintly. "Zara," he whispered, feeling a deep ache in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. As he stood there, trying to process everything that had happened, a sound made him turn. A ship was descending from the sky, but it wasn't Krayix. Its design was sleek and organic, reminiscent of Zara's crashed scout ship. The Falaran had arrived. As the ship landed and figures began to emerge, Jack squared his shoulders. He had a story to tell, a warning to deliver. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to honor Zara's memory by bringing her people the peace she had sacrificed herself for. With a deep breath, he began to walk towards the Falaran ship. Whatever came next, he knew his life would never be the same. The universe had opened up before him, full of wonders and terrors beyond imagining. And somewhere out there, he hoped, Zara was watching. Her final gift to him, and to both their peoples, was a chance for a better future, a chance he intended to make the most of. As he approached the Falaran delegation, Jack allowed himself a small, sad smile. "Well, Zara," he murmured, "looks like I've got some explaining to do. I hope I can do your story justice." With that, he stepped forward to meet humanity's first official alien contact, carrying the weight of 2 worlds on his shoulders. The final stand. The Falaran ship hummed with barely contained energy as it cut through the atmosphere of Nexus 9. Jack sat in what passed for a briefing room, surrounded by alien technology that made his head spin. Across from him, 3 Falaran officials listened intently as he recounted the events of the past few days. And that's when the Nexus destabilized. Jack finished, his voice hoarse from talking. Zara, she sacrificed herself to contain the explosion. To save me. To save all of us, I think. The Falaran exchanged glances, their silvery skin shimmering under the ship's lights. The one in the center, who had introduced himself as High Commander Vaylor, leaned forward. Your account is troubling, Jack Harper, Vaylor said, his words translated by a device similar to the one Zara had worn. If what you say is true, then the situation is far graver than we had imagined. Jack nodded grimly. The Krayaks know about the Nexus technology now. They may not have this one, but they'll be looking for others. And from what I saw, this stuff is too dangerous for anyone to control. Another Falaran, a scientist named Lysana, spoke up. The Nexus points were never meant to be weapons. They were created as a safeguard, a way to preserve our civilization in the event of a cosmic catastrophe. But their power, she shook her head. It seems our ancestors underestimated the temptation such power would present. So what happens now? Jack asked, looking from one alien face to another. You folks going to drop me back on Nexus 9 and call it a day? Vaylor's expression was unreadable. That would be the simplest solution, but perhaps not the wisest. He stood, pacing the length of the room. You have shown great courage, Jack Harper, and you have given us valuable information at great personal cost. We would be fools to dismiss you so easily. Jack felt a glimmer of hope. So, what are you suggesting? Vaylor turned to face him, his violet eyes intense. We find ourselves at a crossroads. The Krayaks will not stop searching for Nexus technology, and now that they know of its existence, they may intensify their war efforts. We need allies, Jack Harper. Your people have been isolated from galactic affairs, but perhaps it is time for that to change. Jack's eyes widened as he realized what Vaylor was proposing. You want me to be some kind of ambassador? Lysana nodded. You have experienced our technology, witnessed our conflict firsthand. You can speak to your people in terms they will understand, help them prepare for what's coming. It was a lot to take in. Jack's mind raced with the implications. He thought of Earth, of the colonies, of all the people going about their lives, with no idea of the cosmic drama unfolding around them. All right, he said finally. I'll do it, but on one condition. Vaylor raised an eyebrow ridge. And that is? Jack's expression hardened. We find a way to end this war. Not with super weapons or ancient technology, but with understanding. Diplomacy. It's what Zara would have wanted. The Falaran were silent for a moment. Then, to Jack's surprise, Vaylor smiled. You continue to impress, Jack Harper. Very well. We will pursue peace, but we must also prepare for war. The Krayaks may not give us a choice. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The fourth Falaran, who had been silent until now, rushed to a console. Multiple Krayak signatures detected. She called out, They're on an intercept course. Vaylor's expression turned grim. It seems the Krayaks are not content to let us leave with our secrets. Brace for combat. The ship shuddered as it executed evasive maneuvers. Through a view screen, Jack saw the dark shapes of Krayaks vessels emerging from hyperspace. We're outnumbered, Lysana said, her voice tense. We can't fight our way through. Jack's mind raced. They couldn't let the Krayaks capture them, not with the knowledge they carried. But a direct confrontation was suicide. Then, an idea struck him. The caves, he said suddenly. The river system we used to escape earlier. Could we use it to lose them? Vaylor looked at him sharply. Explain. Jack quickly outlined his plan. It was risky, borderline insane, but it was their best shot at survival. Moments later, the Falaran ship dove towards the planet's surface, skimming just above the rocky terrain. Behind them, Krayaks fighters gave chase, energy weapons lighting up the sky. There, Jack shouted, pointing to a massive cave opening. That's our entry point. The pilot, displaying skill that left Jack in awe, threaded the ship through the cave mouth. They were plunged into darkness, relying on the ship's sensors to navigate the twisting tunnels. Multiple impacts detected, the tactical officer reported. Hull integrity at 82% and falling. Keep going, Veller ordered. Followed Jack Harper's directions. Jack closed his eyes, trying to remember the path they had taken during their escape. Left here, he called out. Then a sharp right. There should be a large cavern coming up. The ship shuddered as it executed the tight turns. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of pursuing Krayx vessels crashing into the cave walls, unable to match the Falaran ship's agility in the confined space. Suddenly, they burst into an enormous underground chamber. A vast underground lake spread out before them, its surface shimmering in the dim light. Now what? Lysana asked, her eyes wide. Jack grinned. Now we go for a swim. Can this ship operate underwater? Veller nodded. For a limited time, yes. But the Krayx vessels won't be able to follow. Jack finished. Their ships are built for space combat, not submersion. This is our chance to lose them. Without waiting for further discussion, the pilot plunged the ship into the lake. The view screen filled with murky water as they descended into the depths. For several tense minutes, they navigated through underwater tunnels, the ship's hull groaning under the pressure. Jack held his breath, praying his gamble would pay off. Finally, they emerged into daylight, bursting from a waterfall on the far side of the mountain range. The sky above was clear, no sign of Krayx pursuit. A cheer went up from the Falaran crew. Even Veller allowed himself a small smile. Impressive thinking. Jack Harper, he said. You may have saved all our lives. Jack sagged in relief, the adrenaline leaving him in a rush. Just doing what Zara would have done, he murmured. As the ship ascended towards orbit, Jack gazed out at the landscape of Nexus 9, the world where his life had changed forever. He thought of Zara, of her sacrifice, of the vast cosmic drama he had been thrust into. So, he said, turning to Veller, what's our next move? Veller's expression was resolute. We make for Earth. It's time your people learned the truth about their place in the galaxy. And it's time we forged an alliance that may be our only hope against the Krayx. Jack nodded, a mix of excitement and trepidation washing over him. I just hope they're ready for this. It's going to change everything. Change is the only constant in the universe, Lysana said softly. Your people will adapt. They must. As the ship broke free of Nexus 9's atmosphere, Jack took one last look at the planet that had been his home for so long. He thought of the life he was leaving behind, of the uncertain future that lay ahead. But he also thought of Zara, of her courage, and her dream of a peaceful galaxy. He thought of the Krayx and the destruction they would bring if left unchecked. And he thought of Earth, of all the people who had no idea of the wonders and dangers that awaited them among the stars. Well, he said, more to himself than to the Falaran, I wanted to see more of the galaxy. Guess I should be careful what I wish for. Huh. Veller placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, the gesture surprisingly human. You have taken your first step into a larger world, Jack Harper. The road ahead will not be easy, but you do not walk it alone. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. No, he agreed. We're in this together now. For Zara, for Earth, for the entire galaxy. As the ship engaged its faster-than-light drive, preparing to make the jump to Earth, Jack felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for Zara, fear of the unknown, excitement for the adventure ahead. But above all, he felt hope. Hope that together, humans and Falaran could forge a new path, a path that led not to destruction, but to understanding. The stars streaked into lines as the ship jumped to FTL. Jack Harper, once a solitary prospector on a forgotten world, now found himself at the center of a cosmic story, a story of war and peace, of ancient technologies and new alliances, a story that would shape the fate of entire civilizations. As Earth grew closer, Jack steeled himself for the challenges ahead. He would honor Zara's memory. He would help bridge the gap between humans and aliens. And maybe, just maybe, he would help save the galaxy. The adventure, it seemed, was only beginning. Epilogue. Months later, on a stage before the United Nations General Assembly, Jack Harper stood tall. Behind him, Valar and a delegation of Falaran waited patiently. Before him, the assembled leaders of Earth watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Jack took a deep breath, thinking of all that had led him to this moment. Of Zara, of Nexus 9, of the vast, star-spanning conflict that now threatened them all. People of Earth, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed chamber. I come before you today with an incredible story. A story of other worlds, of advanced civilizations, of dangers and wonders beyond our wildest dreams. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But more than that, I come with an invitation to join something greater than ourselves. To reach for the stars not in fear, but in hope. To forge alliances that will see us through the challenges ahead. Jack gestured to the Falaran behind him. We are not alone in the universe, and now we have a choice to make. Do we turn inward, clinging to our isolation? Or do we step forward, embracing our place in the galactic community? He thought of Zara, of her sacrifice, of the future she had dreamed of. The road ahead will not be easy. There are those who would see us destroyed, who fear what we might become. But together, united with our new allies, I believe we can build a future worthy of our potential. A future of peace, of discovery, of endless possibility. Jack smiled, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. The stars are calling, people of Earth. It's time we answered. As applause began to ripple through the chamber, Jack knew this was only the beginning. Challenges lay ahead. Diplomatic hurdles, technological leaps, the ever-present threat of the Krayaks. But for the first time in a long while, he felt truly optimistic about the future. Somewhere out there, he liked to think Zara was watching, and he hoped she would be proud of what they were about to build together. The age of Earth's isolation was over. The age of galactic citizenship was about to begin. And Jack Harper, once a lonely prospector on a forgotten world, now stood at the threshold of humanity's greatest adventure. The stars, it seemed, were only the beginning.